the major challenge Indian economy is passing through is the sluggish growth. Everybody knows today that the GDP is declining. The growth rate of India's economy, which means the rate of growth of GDP, is at as low as 5%. The economic survey last year estimated it to be around 7%, but in reality, only 5% growth rate was achieved. So the economic survey for this year projects the growth to be at around 6 to 6.5%. In fact, this itself is an exaggerated account because the International Monetary Fund estimated India's growth rate to be 5.8% in the next financial year. And even the chief economic advisor to the State Bank of India estimated it to be around 5.5 to 6%. However, the economic survey estimates India's growth rate to be 6 to 6.5% in 2020-21. So obviously, when economic survey expects the growth rate to be around 6 to 6.5%, what we hope is that the budget will suggest certain measures, budget will propose certain actions so that the economy will get kick-started. But the reality today is this budget completely failed to kick-start the economy. The major challenge for low growth rate in India is the declining consumption, especially in the rural area. There is a massive erosion in the overall consumption of goods and services. So this is the major challenge that is facing Indian economy. In fact, the latest consumer expenditure survey reveals that the consumption level has actually fallen. This is unprecedented according to the Nobel laureate Abhijit Banerjee too. So what should a budget do? Budget should obviously keep money in the hands of the people so that they can consume more goods and services. More consumption of goods and services will obviously accelerate economic growth. Unfortunately, the government has been giving concessions to the corporate sector. The corporate taxes have been reduced to the world's lowest level. Around 1,45,000 crores as benefit has been doled out to the corporate sector. But in reality, the challenge today is not to incentivize the supply. It's to incentivize the corporate sector so that they supply more goods and services. But today the challenge is to create a demand in the economy. So obviously everybody was expecting that the government will spend more in the economy so that the demand will get generated. But unfortunately, this budget failed to expand any public expenditure. In fact, last year's budget estimated the total central government expenditure to be 13.6% of GDP. But in revised estimates, it came down to 13.2. That means the government proposed 13.6% of GDP to be the government expenditure in the last year budget. But in reality, it came to be around 13.2%. This year, it is 13.5%. This budget, the 2021 budget, estimates suggest that the government proposes to spend 13.5% of GDP as its total expenditure. So what does it indicate? So it indicates that there will not be any expansion in the public expenditure. So the government is not going to spend more. So therefore, when the government can't spend more, obviously the private investment will not be forthcoming. So the history of the world economy suggests that the private economy will expand. Private investment will expand only when public expenditure expands. So the public expenditure is essential to give the stimulus to the economy. So if you look at some of the very important schemes that provide incomes to the people, there's a massive decline. The food subsidies have declined by 69,000 crores. At a time when there is a pervasive hunger, at a time when there is a need to expand the public distribution system, this budget reduces the food subsidies to the tune of 69,000 crores. So the most important scheme that provided incomes and jobs to the rural youth, rural poor is the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Program, popularly known as NREGA. So for NREGA, there is a massive decline of 10,000 crores. So last year revised estimates, the government spent 71,000 crores on NREGA. And this budget proposes an expenditure of 61,500 crores, which means there is a decline of 9,500 crores. Can you imagine, even for a rural job scheme, which is so critical to generate the rural demand? So in fact, the 1920 budget itself has seen a massive reduction in spending. The midday meal scheme, the spending has come down by 1100 crores. So there, the Anganwadis, the spending has come down by 2100 crores. So on one side, you are massively reducing the social sector spending, and this budget fails to increase any substantial amounts to this sector. Well, the finance minister so prominently talked about agriculture irrigation. So the finance minister says the budget is allocating 2,83,000 crores on agriculture, irrigation, rural development, etc., allied sector. But this is only 19,000 crores more than what was budgeted last time, which means if you take the inflation into account, if you take the price rise into account, there is no actual increase in the spending for even agriculture sector. Look at education sector. The finance minister so proudly said that she is allocating 99,300 crores. But this is just 4,500 crores more than what was budgeted last year. So when you take the price rise into account, there will be actual decline in the real allocation for the education sector. So if you look at every sector today, there is a slashing of expenditure. Even a sector like defense. Surprisingly, the government talks so much about national security, has only marginally increased the budget for defense sector. In fact, the allocation for the Indian Air Force has actually come down. So can you imagine, on one side government talks about national security, when there is a military modernization program is taking place, the government reduces the budget for that. The reason for all this is the government revenues have substantially come down. So even there is no guarantee that these budgeted figures will remain, because the government hopes to increase the tax revenue by 12%, but no guarantee that will be realized. Last year, the finance minister expected a 18.5% rise in revenues, but in the first few months it was hardly 3%. So this shows that even these figures may not still remain. For example, in the case of disinvestment, the government last year budgeted for 1,05,000 crores as a revenue through disinvestment. But what has been achieved? Only 18,000 crores till January 2020. Now the government says it will generate 2,10,000 crores from disinvestment. No guarantee that these proceeds will come. So when the money through tax revenues, through disinvestment do not come, there will be a further cut in the expenditure for the critical sector. So look at every sector: agriculture, irrigation, rural development, education, Anganwadis, midday meal scheme, food subsidies, all these pro-people schemes, rural employment guarantee scheme, there is either reduction in the allocation or a marginal increase that doesn't even take into account the price rise. So this, how will it generate the economic growth? Nobody knows.